My name is Jeff Lestz, and I'm part of Hillsong London. Been part of Hillsong London for 12 years, and originally from the U.S. and moved here 13 years ago. And people always ask, why'd you do that? And I go, well, for the weather, obviously. And I'm the co-CEO of a company called Genistar. We're a financial education company and financial services company. Our mission statement is to help families become debt-free and financially independent by educating them and empowering them. And, business is really pretty simple. You just have to find a need and fill it. And we have definitely found a need when you think about the fact that there's 14,000 hours of education that we go through, and literally we don't learn much about money. And so my life today is a wonderful life. My wife and I have a home here in London and a home in Nice, France, so we can get some sunshine. And I married my high school sweetheart. Margot and I met when we were 15, and that's a long time ago, that picture. But Margot and I, just this last December, were married for 40 years. And we got married when we were 19, and I've been in business now with my business partner for over 35 years. And, you would look at my life and you'd go, wow, this guy, man, he must have really come from a great family, and he's got a stable life. But boy, stability was just not in my life. But upheaval and this message that we heard about, a glitch. And it's amazing how that glitch really turned into my mission in life. And I'd just like to share a little bit with you about the journey that the Lord took me on. Really, for what the enemy meant for evil, God turned into good. And I learned at a very young age to not allow my history to become my destiny. And I was originally born and raised in a Jewish family in Chicago. And these are my parents, and I'm the youngest of 3 children. And when I was 5, excuse me. My father had a business failure and committed suicide. Left my mother penniless and emotionally distraught, and she had nervous breakdown, became an alcoholic and a drug addict. She died 2 years later. And all 3 of us kids were put into foster care, and after my father committed suicide, all 3 of us were split up into different homes. And I was sharing with someone recently that my first foster family that I was in, I'll never forget, it was during Christmas and Hanukkah. And I was sitting at the top of the steps, and this family, that they weren't a Jewish family, and the pastor came over and was asking the people about my sister and I. We were together, and they said, well, they're Jewish. And I'll never forget that I heard him say, he said, you need to get those damn Jews out of your home. And I remember, excuse me, thinking, why do they hate me because I'm Jewish? Or why won't our relatives take us in? I was in 5 different foster homes and an orphanage, and it was funny, the last foster home I was in, they were going to put me in a boys' home, and my social worker came to me and said, we can't find a Jewish home. And I said, well, what if I could find one? I was 12. And I called up my old Cub Scouts master and asked him if they'd ever thought about a foster child. So I placed myself into a home at 12 years old. I was quite creative. And I was in and out of all these different homes. And at age 12 and a half, after I was living with this family, I started getting in trouble. I got in a gang. I tried to commit suicide at 12 and a half. They locked me up in a mental institution. I was there for 3 months, and I ran away and lived on the streets of Chicago for 2.5 years. The first 6 months, ate out of garbage bins and slept in alleys. And met up with a bunch of hippies when I was 13. They were drug dealers, and they took me in and I started selling and delivering drugs on the streets of Chicago. Or as one person asked me once, what was your first job? And I said it was pharmaceutical sales. And at 15 years old, I cried out to God, and I was strung out on drugs, and I said, God, if you're really the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you know, even through this whole time in all the foster homes and orphanage, I was still raised in synagogue and Hebrew school, but I really didn't believe that that there was a God. And I thought, you know, I'm stuck in poverty. I mean, my life will never change. But I cried out to God, and I hitchhiked 400 miles away to see some friends of mine on a hippie commune. And when I got there, my 4 friends, who were all Jewish, they were in their early 20s, they greeted me, and they said, come on in. And I sat down, and they said, why don't you join us? I said, what are you doing? They said, we're having a Bible study. And I said, what have you guys been smoking this time? And they began to share with me about Jesus. And I said, guys, I would never be a Christian. I would, if I'd be anything, I'd be Jewish. And they said, well, Jesus is Jewish. I said, really? I thought he was a Catholic. I didn't know that. And they began to show me in the Bible how that God just, you know, that Jesus came from a Jewish heritage. And I said, well, I have no interest. And they said, why don't you go to church with us? And so I said, it's not for me. They said, well, you're just a chicken. I said, well, I'll prove it. I'll go. And we're driving to church, and I'll never forget Michael, who eventually became my foster father. He said, have you ever been to church? I said, no. He said, well, this is a Pentecostal church. I said, well, I don't care how much it costs. I don't have any money with me. I went back to high school. I met Margot. She was the only other hippie in the high school. I led her to the Lord when she was 15. We dated from 16 to 19. And I went on to university, got into business. And at 24 years old, I found myself deep in debt. And I'll never forget the day at 24. And I cried out and said, God, if you would show me how to get out of debt, how to kind of understand the mysteries of money, boy, I would dedicate my life to teaching this to people. 2 weeks later, I met a guy that took me under his wings, coached me, mentored me. I worked with him. By the time I was 31 years old, had become a millionaire. And but it was based on the concept of people before profits. And I'll never forget, at age 27, it was my 3rd year in business. I went to my pastor, and I got out of debt. And we were saving money, and we're talking 30-some years ago, and the mortgage was around 60 grand. And I went to my pastor and said, Pastor, Margot and I would like to pay the church off. And I remember he gave me the payment book, and I said, don't you want to pray about it? He said, no, I'm a man of faith. I believe the Holy Spirit's been talking to you, son. And I started really understanding, you know, it's interesting. Jesus, Paul, Peter, Job, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob were all entrepreneurs. And I began to realize there was a calling on my life. And what's interesting is, in the last 35 years I've been in business, we've led over 5,000 people to the Lord through our business. And so this test that I had was a testimony. This mess that I had turned into my message, and what was the glitch in my life really and truly turned into my mission in life of helping people, sharing the gospel with them, but also practically helping them in their finances. God bless you.